Welcome back, everybody, to Top Tier Studios. This is episode 3, and in this episode, we're going to be starting our very first area. So this episode is going to include basically a 3-part process. We're going to be placing down our first ride, we're going to be doing the queue for it and building around the actual ride, and then we'll also have a building around the queue as well, and then we'll be making a third building that's really not going to have much of a use yet. I don't really know if we'll ever have a use for it, or if it's just going to be kind of like a space holder, but for right now, we are just going to be doing those 3 buildings for this episode. And as I said, we are starting our first area, which is going to be the city area. So there's going to be a bunch of city kind of themed or city rides here that we all are going to have. There's going to be a couple of shops here. There's going to be a food outlet down this walkway. There's going to be a restroom building. There's going to be pretty much everything that you would need down one of the areas. And then near the end of this part of the series, I will be going and I will kind of talk about what it's going to be leading into next, which will be at the end of this walkway. So for right now, though, we are just going to be concentrating on the beginning part of it. So that's going to include this building that we are creating here. So we are basically enclosing this whole queue, and it's the queue to the bumper cars ride. And this building is basically just going to be a super simple building. I'm going to make it just an apartment building, nothing too crazy. In cities, there's going to be a lot of residential areas, and then there's also going to be some other things. So that's one thing that I really just thought it would be really easy to make and not really have to theme it too much, but at the same time, we still had to do a good amount of theming to it to make sure that it was kind of made sense, I guess. So we got our flooring going in here because grass is not really flooring, and we'll have to alter the building height as well to make it so that the guests' feet aren't cutting through the ground and all that. So we'll figure that out later on, but basically this building is a residential building, so we'll have to put in a bunch of windows and stuff, and we'll make a couple of floors here, so that's floor 2, and we'll put on the roof. And I might have mentioned this in the past couple of episodes, but I have not, I have now, but haven't put down any of those ducts or like air ventilation systems yet. I was going to get those on the ThemeMaker Toolkit because I know that's there in that, but I just haven't. I did download it now, but I'm a couple episodes ahead of you guys in creating the actual park. So I did place those down off camera, so you might notice them in a couple episodes. You might notice them, but not right now because I didn't have them downloaded at the time of this build. But that's besides the point, really. It doesn't really hinder the theming of this building. It's not really too important either. So basically, we were just placing down a couple of extra details here. You can see that the roofing, or the second floor tiling that I put down, it's kind of clipping through the building, so I'm putting a little bit of details on the outside of the building here to kind of cover that up. And then we are putting down some signage and stuff, and we'll be putting down some windows and making sure that everything looks like a residential building. And then we'll be moving on to the second building, which is actually going to be right next to it. So this second building is going to be enclosing the bumper cars ride. And something that I did forget to mention about this queue right here, we're going to be doing some gardening work next to it as well, and we'll also be doing a little bit of interior theming, but that'll be a little bit later on. Now, back to what I was saying about the bumper cars actual building. That one is going to be inside of a theater. And I don't know what made me decide to make this one a theater, although now I'm kind of thinking about it, it could kind of make sense, I guess, because demolition derbies don't really happen that often anymore, now that we're in more modern times, so it could be more seen in like films and stuff of like older times and stuff where they were way more common, so maybe that would make sense to have it in a theater. I don't know, I'm just kind of making that stuff up, but it's gonna have a feel of like it's a building on Broadway, but at the same time it's a little bit different because I wanted it to be open just in case something happened and things needed to be like aired out inside. There was a bunch of airways, I guess you could say, or windows but they are actually open. So that's kind of what the theme they're thinking for this building was. Now I like how it turned out, but I guess the reasoning doesn't really make all that much sense. And if it comes down to it, it could just be that the park needed a ride, and it doesn't really have to be themed to anything. It just could just be a ride that would make sense in this area, which is kind of what I went off of at the beginning anyway. So now that we are continuing to theme this building, we're going to be creating one more building, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but I will mention that it's going to be the building that separates this street and the street next to it that's going diagonally back towards the back of the park. So I'm not going to really talk about that street too much, just because I want to keep that a secret until we get to that street. But for right now, we are just going to be creating the first building on that street because it needed to be done in order to kind of get ready for what's to come on this street. So now that we are continually working on this, we are still doing this border stuff, and there's really not much to talk about really besides putting down these borders here. So I will give you guys a little bit of insight on what is to come in the rest of this street, I guess. So in the next episode, we're going to be starting our very first coaster. So we'll be putting down our coaster and we'll be making the layout in that. And then the episode after that, we'll be doing pretty much everything else for the coaster, the queue, the exit, and the exit is going to be a very extensive process, but you guys will see that in episode 5. Yeah, this is 3, 4, 5. Yep. Well, that will be in episode 5. So, yeah, we have 2 exciting episodes coming up after this one, which is pretty fun. We'll be doing our first coaster, which is a coaster that I've actually never built before. Well, I've built it, but I've never really tried to build it how I did. So that's all to come, and we'll be also finishing up this area with a couple more rides, and then we'll be leading into our next area. So that's all really to come, as I keep saying. But we are only about halfway through this episode here, and we are still working on our first building, because, you know, it takes a little bit of time to get these really detailed and stuff. But we're almost done with it. We just have to do this little bit of garden here. And really the only reason why I did it is because it's next to an open grass area, and it's next to the entrance plaza as well. And I wanted to make sure that the entrance plaza was really nice, because the entrance would be. Now, as I was trying to theme the interior of this building for the queue, I found this car that I was looking for in episode 1, but could not find. And it's this old version of like a Cadillac almost, or yeah, I would say it's like an old Cadillac. And basically it's a roofless car, and it's old. It looks like an old car. So I decided, you know what, let's plop one down in our actual parking lot, and there was a cut there, and that's because I actually placed down a couple of them. But I wanted to leave that out of this episode, really, because that's not what we're doing in this episode. We're working on some other stuff. So now as we get back to what we are doing, we're starting our second building. So I guess you could say this is the second part of this episode out of the 3 parts that we're going to have. So this first part is, or the first part of the second part. We're in the second part, not to be confusing, even though that was probably really confusing. This second part is going to consist of making this theater building, as I was saying. And this theater building went through a couple of different changes, I would say. I really was struggling to find the actual, like, the correct pieces I want to use for this actual build. So you can see I started with this big box structure, because what else am I going to make right now besides this box structure? All that really matters is the front facade right now. So I made this box, I guess, with this brick, and the only reason why I don't really like it is because it has that pink border going around on the middle level, because it has like a bottom extra footer, I guess, for the wall. But it looks good at the end, because I'm able to kind of fix up the front. But anyway, so now moving on to the front, it's a little bit harder to do the front because I really didn't know how I wanted to do it. So I kind of went through the objects that were basically the same building material, and I looked at it and I decided, ooh, this one looks good. So I placed it along the top. It's a bunch of see-through windows there with these I don't really know what to call them, like separators with these little individual footers on them. I guess I'm gonna call them footers, those little pink things. So then I put a little entrance there next on the exit there, and it really just kind of kept going and going until I finally got to where we are now, where I used the pillars instead of an individual window, because something that I really wanted to keep in mind was parents don't really ride these types. Well, some of them do, but some of them don't. Some of them just kind of stand outside and watch their kids go on it, and then they'll meet them after the ride. So they want to like watch them do it, or they take pictures for like memories and stuff. So I wanted to keep that in mind. So I wanted to keep the one side open so that parents could actually do that. So that's why I left it open. So it's a little bit different style of theater, but at the same time I wanted it to be a theater because I really didn't know what else to theme it to. And, as I said before, this could be kind of themed to an old type of movie. So, now we are moving on to the third and final part of this video, which is this last building that we're making. It's going to be another residential building, but it's going to be on the other side of the street from our first one. And by the way, if you missed it, I did name the first building that we made Main Street Apartments, just because it's really basic and there was no thought process into it. It just made sense because it's Main Street and it's an apartment building, so I put it there. Now, this one, as I said a little bit before as well, it's going to be separating the two streets. It's separating the diagonal one and then the main street that we're making right now. So, what we're doing currently is basically finding a bunch of curved pieces that could work at this corner, because I really couldn't find anything that I really liked that could be a big pillar or something that would make sense, I guess. So, I eventually found these octagonal, I think they're octagons, or hexagons. I think they're octagon, no, they're hexagons. So they're hexagonal shapes, I guess, and they go up in the actual tower, and they kind of add a little bit more texture to the building, which I actually end up really liking. Now, this building, in terms of functionality, does not have one yet. I really didn't know what was gonna happen, and in the next couple of episodes, we'll be making that coaster, as I said, and then theming that. So I did leave it open just in case I needed a little bit of extra room for the coaster, but I will say this, we're not going to be having to destroy this building at the moment, in any near future episodes. Now, once we get to this diagonal street, as in like when we start building rides and stuff in it, we might actually have to work inside of it in terms of like a queue line or something. But at the same time, it really seems unlikely based on what I have made already in some future episodes. So, yeah, I think it's just going to be mainly cosmetic. Now, really for the details for this one, I kind of kept it light. I found a couple of windows that I liked. They looked a little bit older, and they're actually lit. So, at nighttime, they cast a little bit of an eerie glow, which is a little weird, but at the same time, they kind of fit into the building. And on top of that, the actual windows are pretty big. I didn't expect them to be actually this big compared to the windows I've been using, but it works, as I said. So we're just going to be working on this for the next 2 minutes or so, and then we'll be pretty much done with this episode. So as I said, we're nearing the... And this is the last thing that we're doing, so we're nearing the end of this episode. Now, as I've already really talked about what we're going to be doing in the future, but, yeah, I don't really want to disclose too much about the coaster, except we're doing a coaster in the next episode, because I want it to be a surprise. Now, I will give you guys that hint that I have really already mentioned, but I'll mention it again. It's going to be a coaster that I never really made, but it's, like, I made the coaster type, but it's a little bit of a different concept with the coaster. So, it'll be a little bit, it'll be interesting. And let me say this, it is a little bit of a difficult process to do something that you've never done, but if it works out, then it really does pay off. And that's something that I really learned with that coaster, and I'm really happy with it. So we'll see what happens in the next episode with that. But just as a little recap, we did a Dodge 'em ride. I was going to place a little bit more rides in this actual episode, but then I decided, no, let's wait until after the coaster, because that coaster could take up a lot more space than I want it to. So, Yeah, again, that coaster kind of really restricted on what I could do in this episode, but I knew I needed to have this first area, or the entrance to this area, done, because otherwise I really wouldn't know where I would put this coaster in the first place. So, we did this Dodge Drum ride here, the bumper cars, and then we did the queue cover for that, or not a queue cover, but a queue building, and then a building for the bumper car ride, and then we're just doing this last building with this really cool front to it, or a little side corner, I guess you could say, and then we're just doing a little bit more facade work. But that would be it for this episode. We are pretty much done. Just a little bit more cosmetical stuff. I really don't know what else there is to say for this episode, except yeah, we're pretty much done. We're doing a little bit more gardening work, and I think I neglected light in this one, but I might have to do that off camera, because I think I neglect it for the next couple of episodes too. So with that all being said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and make sure to have an amazing day.